Upon great request, language review Japanese, it is. This is Metatron checking out language Simp. As a Japanese speaker, I'm really looking forward to this one. You recommend it, I deliver. Let's go.
こんにちは、ようこそこのチャンネルへ。アメリカ人で Language Sim と申します。Today we're going to talk about the Japanese language, otherwise formerly known as anime language, East North Korean, North Australian, or Nintendo language. This is the 7th episode of Language Review, a series where I review the languages of the world, sort of like a film critic or a video game reviewer, specifically from the perspective of a language learner. I'll discuss who speaks them, their grammar, their difficulty, and tons of other stuff before finally giving them an official Language Sim certified rating on the Simp scale.
Come on.
If you enjoy this video, let me know in the comments which language you'd like me to review next, and without further ado, Saiko.
Ooh, I want to learn Japanese. I love anime, sushi, and vending machines.
Shut up! There's so much more to Japanese than cartoons, raw fish, and hyper-convenient shopping. Japanese is mainly spoken on Anime Island. I mean, in Japan.
Hyper-convenient shopping. Yeah, that's Japan, all right. I remember when I was living in Japan, goodness gracious, sometimes you'd be like, hey, it's 3:50 in the morning, I can't sleep. Let's go to the kombini around the corner, the convenience store, because of course they're open all night with because they've got those poor lads, they're gonna sleep in there. So I walk in, there is no one, you hear the then the lad from the back that you can't see screams "Irashaimase," and then he comes out and you can tell I just woke him up, you can tell. And then you can conveniently buy your onigiri, your food, read 15 manga standing next to a Japanese businessman without paying, and then I'm not joking, buy a plane ticket / pay your bills at 3:50 in the morning. Welcome to Japan. I did all that.
Country full of vibrant culture, rich history, and technology that's advancing a little too quickly in my opinion. The nation is located off the left coast of the United States, and almost all of the country's 125 million residents speak Japanese on a daily basis, except for the incompetent Western weeaboos who are only in Japan on a quest for a real-life waifu. The name of Japan in Japanese literally means origin of the sun. How cocky is that? Japan didn't make the sun. Bangladesh made the sun. The vast majority of Japanese people do not speak American, thank God. So learning the language will unlock communication DLC with a ton of new NPCs. In addition to Anime Island, Japanese is also spoken by over 400,000 people living in Brazil.
I did not know that.
Japanese is spoken in Brazil? É muito legal, irmão. Where else is Japanese spoken? The states that are united? Wow, even we have 500,000 Japanese speakers. I hope there's no tragic history behind that, but given our track record. On top of
I need to see if I can run into a few more Japanese speakers, because honestly, I miss speaking the language. It did happen once that I ran into a couple of Japanese in New York in the Museum of Science, and I literally traumatized them because I started speaking to them in Japanese. And then it was so funny because we're sitting at a cafe, right, the cafeteria, and I hear them speak Japanese, but it's so quiet because Japanese people, when they speak, they are the opposite of us. We are like, oh, I'm gonna broadcast it to the entire cafeteria, but the Japanese, そうですね。すいません。申し訳ございません。はい。素晴らしいですね。That's how they spoke. And so I was like trying to lean in, but I didn't want to be rude. And I was trying to lean in, and I'm like, is this Japanese, for crying out loud? And then finally I hear this. So I'm like, okay, it's Japanese. So I start speaking Japanese to them. We start having a conversation. They're very nice and polite. And then I see this Indian woman sitting right next to us, and she starts speaking Japanese. And so now Japanese has become an international language in America. An Italian, 2 Japanese, and an Indian speaking Japanese in America. That happened.
Of that, it's estimated that about 4 million very normal people worldwide are studying the language right now. And by studying it, I mean that they're all fighting each other on Reddit about the best way to learn Japanese instead of actually studying it. The Japanese learning community seems pretty toxic from the outside. They're all super passionate and motivated, but they divide themselves into various factions that are constantly at war. My favorite is the all Japanese all the time, or AJAT faction, which consists of people who think that the best way to learn learn is to completely forget their native language and live-action roleplay as a monolingual Japanese person 24/7. It sounds cool, but they take it to the extreme. Like an AJAT dude from Ohio will ignore his family for years, and he wouldn't even call an ambulance in his native language if he was about to die. I'm more of an awat type guy, all Uzbek all the time. But if you can separate Japanese from its community of learners, you'll see it's quite interesting. Japanese is diverse and has a bunch of dialects that can be divided into 4 overgeneralized umbrella groups. The geography of Japan is confusing, since East Japan is also North Japan and West Japan is also South Japan. So let's just imagine it's a banana. At the top part of the banana near the stem, they speak Eastern Japanese.
I mean, it's a very good way to put it, yeah. And it's true, there is a demarcation in Japan whereby they will pronounce, particularly when it comes to pitch, it's like there is a line, a physical line, that if you step over your pitch switch, it's like they do it on purpose. So how do you guys say inu? Okay, then we're gonna say inu. Ha, take that, you muppet. But honestly, I really wonder what happens if you are like standing on top of the line and you go inu. Inu, 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 inu. What if you stand in the middle?
Which is the most standard, and it includes the most textbook dialect found in Tokyo. And at the bottom left part of the banana, they speak Western Japanese, which is a bit more complicated, so let's just pretend like it doesn't exist. Then there's an unnatural and overly standardized dialect that you'll hear newscasters and weathermen yapping in. And finally, there's the creme de la creme Kyushu dialect spoken on the foot of Japan. And if I was forced to learn Japanese, I'd study one of these.
Yeah, it is harder. Of course, he's being sarcastic, but it is harder to study anything that isn't standard unless you like live there and possibly marry in. Then, yeah, sure, you could pick it up. But the reason why it's a lot harder to study any dialect or any variety or accent that isn't standard is because all the publications and all the material is overabundantly, of course, in Hyojungo, which pretty much is the way they speak in Tokyo. And oftentimes when I see foreigners that are like, oh no, I speak Osaka Ben, the reality is that they say a few words the way they do in Osaka. But then again, it's more of a mash because it is difficult. They exist, but it is difficult to become like 100% a speaker of any variety that isn't standard. And even standard has been, at the end of the day, when we speak Japanese, we just sound foreign most of the time. Exception being some cases or maybe some sentences and some people like Dogen. But if you're not Dogen or even Matt versus Japan, they're really, really advanced speakers. But unless you're one of those, you will sound foreign. Maybe you won't sound as foreign as others. You won't say arigato. And once again, depending on who you learn it from, you could say the standard arigato, or you could sound a bit more like arigato, which is kind of more like they do it, I think, down in Kansai. But once again, if you're from Kansai and you think I'm wrong, no problem. The way I say is arigato.
They're the juiciest and most amazing dialects ever, and I'll explain why later in this video. But none of that even matters because you'll probably learn the anime dialect anyway, which is the overly dramatic, performative, and often sus dialect that ungodly jacked or very generously proportioned cartoon characters. If you learn Japanese, for God's sake, don't speak like you're in an anime. Japanese people hate it. But to be specific, there are 47 dialects of Japanese in total that have some pretty funny stereotypes attached to them. People from Osaka sound like they're from Alabama, while people from Hiroshima sound like they're in the mafia. People from Kyoto sound feminine and elegant. And people from Nagoya apparently sound like cats, so I guess they purr and meow from time to time, but
I actually heard that people in Kansai refer to Tokyo speakers, so standard Japanese speakers. First, they don't call them standard, they call it Tokyo Ben. So people in Kansai do not usually accept, well, it depends, person to person. But oftentimes they do say that men in Tokyo that speak standard Japanese sound a little feminine, believe it or not. So I guess it depends on perspective and depends on who you ask.
Who doesn't? I wish I was a cat. I mean, I'm hairy like a cat.
Me too.
And that's why I'm proud to say that this video is sponsored by manscaped.com. Now it's time to talk about cat girls. I mean, the writing system. Most languages have what linguists call an alphabet. An alphabet. Just one alphabet. But Japanese has three. They're called Hiragana, Katakana, and Kanji, and they're all mixed together in Japanese sentences like oil, water, and corn syrup, which
マクドナルドを食べるのが大好きです.
really hurts my fragile American brain. First, you have hiragana, which is the normal one that they use for writing standard Japanese words. It's obnoxiously long, but it follows a nice pattern with the sounds a, i, u, e, and o being repeated over and over with different leading consonant sounds. Then they go off the rails at the end and just throw a random solo N in the mix to spice things up, which I am pretty sure was plagiarized from the American alphabet. Some letters look really simple, but others look like detailed works of art created by whoever painted the Mona Lisa. I don't know, I don't watch anime. Then there's Katakana, which is the alphabet that
everyone
they mostly
hates it.
use to write foreign words like McDonald's that have slithered their way into the Japanese vocabulary. This one makes me very mad because it's literally the exact same thing as hiragana with the exact same sounds, except they dramatically changed how all the letters look. For example, U looks like a fish in hiragana, but it transforms into a little hiding spot in katakana. There's no resemblance, but they make the same sound.
True, yeah. When it comes to katakana, I think they built it with pieces of kanji, whereas hiragana, I believe, is 100% indigenous to Japanese. In fact, sort of feminine. And the reason why it's so graceful is because it was invented by court women.
I really love the smiley face ones, though. I did once spend 10 hours straight reciting katakana on stream, so I consider myself an expert at it. Finally, you have the kanji alphabet, which is over 50,000 letters long and was stolen from the Chinese language. Don't tell Xiaomei, he'd be pissed. Just like with Chinese letters, each kanji letter represents one word in the language. Just one word. And you gotta memorize them all by heart. But don't worry, they're really easy and no one struggles with them. My favorite kanji is this.
Oh my gosh.
It looks really easy to write, and it means depression. Which is exactly the emotion that I feel when I hear people speak Japanese, but not for the reason you might think. You see, if I sit down and imagine a world where people could watch anime without having their lives revolve around it, I would actually like Japanese, and I think it sounds really nice. So I'm depressed that Western culture ruined this rich Eastern language for me. Japanese is smooth, and it admittedly has a beautiful rhythm to it. There's no consonant clusters, and there's no eins, gauze, or uis to be found in the language. It's simple, like just grab a consonant sound, slap it onto a vowel sound, and then put a bunch of those together and you get a word. But
konnichiwa. I mean, now I'm hungry though.
Don't get me wrong, monolingual betas will still struggle with some sounds. Like the S can be quite lispy sounding, which will be hard unless you have a lisp or are from Spain. And then, of course, as with any language, the R sound is challenging. Apparently it's a flapped R sound, which reminds me of a bird, like, you know, Flappy Bird. But honestly, it just seems like an L sound to me.
It's in between.
L. There's also double consonants and long vowel sounds, but suck it up, nerd. At least the language doesn't have tones like in Chinese.
Makes sense.
No tones. Japanese has something even worse. In Japanese, there's a little concept that this guy Dogen invented called pitch accent. And pitch accent is the...
He invented... Oh my gosh, I love it. That is, if you are in the Japanese learning community, this is a killer joke. This is a killer joke. Dogen is the master.
Kryptonite of every weeaboo. Basically, in Japanese, there is something called a mora, which is practically just a syllable, and a mora can have either a low or high pitch on it. Every word can have one of 4 pitch accent
similar
patterns.
To a syllable.
For example, there's one where the word starts with a low pitch, goes high, and then comes back down again. Then there's another where the word starts low, goes high, and stays high, like in the best Japanese word,
America.
Maybe I said that right. I don't know. And some Japanese words share the same spelling but have different meanings based on the pitch you put on them. Like if you ask the waiter for chopsticks with the wrong pitch accent, they might give you a bridge to eat with because chopsticks and bridge are pronounced the same, just with... Man, I would film that. Man, that would be a great skit. I'll probably do it. So bridge is hashi and chopstick is hashi. Different pitch accents. And often different dialects will have different pitch accents for the same words. It's truly a nightmare. But don't panic, don't panic. Most learners never even study pitch accent, which makes them sound super cringe, but I have a secret cheat code for you. Remember those juicy Kyushu dialects that I said I would study if I were forced to learn Japanese? Well, apparently, at least one of the Kyushu dialects, the Kagoshima dialect, doesn't really use pitch accent. So either study that or claim you're from Kagoshima when you mess up. But you won't mess up most other things in Japanese because this language has some of the easiest grammar in the world. It's so strange though, really. Kagoshima doesn't have... I don't know, really? I'll have to double check that.
I never heard that one Japanese accent in a city doesn't have pitches. If it's true, I'll make a dedicated video because this would be fascinating, but I gotta double check it.
Has no gender, no cases, well, at least not in the traditional way, no plurals, well, at least not in the traditional way, and it doesn't even have a future tense like in most languages, well, at least not in the traditional way.
He's saving himself.
Say that it's difficult, but I wouldn't really use the word difficult to describe it. Russian grammar is difficult, but Japanese grammar is just different. For starters, Japanese is sov instead of svo, meaning the word order is subject, object, verb. Take that, Germans! Y'all only do it sometimes, but the Japanese actually commit to it. The real trouble comes with how foreign the language's structure is to an outsider. They use a bunch of particles, like neutrons and protons. The most common particles are wa and ga, but without watching trillions of hours of anime, it's nearly impossible to get a feel for how these are used.
Very true. Oh my gosh, they use particles. Oh gosh, yeah. Ga is a crazy subtopic to discuss.
Wa can mark something that has already been introduced into the discussion, and ga can mark something that is just being introduced into the discussion. What? And there are 188 of these particles. Yikes. There are also tons of conjugations that will fry your little brain like an eggnog. There are around a dozen which differ across the 3 different verb groups, but thankfully, unlike Navajo with its 39 irregular verbs, there are only 2 irregular verbs in Japanese. But remember that there are 2 different ways to conjugate everything depending on if it's polite or casual,
and
so don't mess that
yeah.
up or you'll sound like an a-hole. Yeah, Japanese actually has 3 levels of formality.
Yeah.
There's casual speech you'd use with your waifu, polite speech you'd use with your waifu's boyfriend, and then very polite speech that you might use with your waifu's boyfriend's father. And this is very foreign to me as a French speaker because in French you always just use very rude speech. Now it's time to talk about shock factor. How will native Japanese speakers react to you speaking their language as a foreigner? Well, the truth is that even though a ton of people study Japanese and base their entire personalities around it, practically none of them can actually speak it. And when they try to, they end up using overly dramatic and cringe phrases that they learn from anime, which make normal Japanese people feel extremely uncomfortable. So if you somehow manage to speak real, normal, decent Japanese to natives, they'll be super impressed. When you shock them, they might not do backflips or give you the deed to their house or all their life savings, but they will buy you a bottle of Pepsi iced cucumber or dried insects you could feed to your lizard from a...
I tried that. I literally tried a couple of things that had cucumber as a flavor. They were horrible. I drank one from a kombini because I was really thirsty after running. I was doing some jogging. And even in that state, I hated every sip of it.
But the thing is, even if you suck at Japanese, they'll probably still act like they're shocked
because they're polite.
They're just super polite. Even if you only know how to say konnichiwa or whatever, they'll tell you that you're a prodigy. They'll say you're the chosen one who has come to unravel the mystery of their language. So definitely don't fall into the trap of taking their kind words at face value. You actually suck. Just don't be weird, don't talk to people like you're in an anime, and resist the urge to buy body pillows. Trust me, I've been there. It gets better. Remember that anime is not real life, and uwu is not a real word. There's so much more I could say about this language, but I don't really want to say anything more about it. So it's time to give Japanese an official language Simp certified rating on the Simp scale. On a scale of dog water to Giga Chad, I place Japanese reluctantly in... the dog water tier. It's really cool and interesting.
Come on, this is rigged. You know how I know this is rigged? Because this was not green at the beginning, was it? I gotta double check that. Wait. See? It was purple. This is rigged. This was rigged all along. Rigged. I proved it.
Scale of dog water to Giga Chad, I place Japanese reluctantly in the dog water tier. It's really cool and interesting, and Japan is a beautiful place full of wonderful and kind people. The language sounds nice, and it seems like a really worthwhile thing to invest your time in. But sadly, degenerate Western culture ruined it for me. It ruined it for us all, and that sucks. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon, where I make
as always. Check him out, give him a like, subscribe to his channel, And as always, thank you so much for watching Noble Ones, and I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Thank you for joining the Academy.